Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 1000 Gurus with me, your host, J.R. Yonocruz. Today's guest is Richard Hardy. Richard works in door-to-door sales for solar. Pretty short and sweet. So, disclaimer, the first 10-ish minutes of this recording got cut off due to technical difficulties, unfortunately. However, we managed to continue through the rest of the conversation with minimal hiccups. Richard's short bio doesn't do him justice, as he's the type of guy you just have to meet in person. He's one of the most positive and uplifting people you'll meet, with a strong focus on constant self-improvement and humility, which is an unbeatable combination of traits. We get into mostly sales. He takes us into the life of a door-to-door salesperson and gives us his daily pitch. We also talk about his mental discipline regimen called 75 Hard and how life events got him into personal development. This was a great conversation, and hopefully we'll be able to do a part 2 in studio since we had so much more to talk about. So without further ado, hope you enjoyed this episode with Richard Hardy. All right, we are back. We'll pick up where we left off. We had some technical difficulties. So I think we were talking about how you got into your current position, right? You said you started off sales, kind of jumped around a bit.
Yeah, so I had started out in New Jersey. I had done windows and doors door to door for like 9 or 10 months. I moved down to Texas and I got into water filtration, like the full home water softeners. And 3 weeks after I got into that, COVID shut down all of Texas. You weren't allowed to go door to door. They had a specific citation out there for that. And so I had hopped out of doing it for a little while. And then whenever they opened those operations back up, I ended up applying for a solar company. And it's not the one that I'm working at currently, but I ended up getting into solar at that point. I did it for 4.5 years, and then I had stepped out of door to door for almost a full year, not an entire year, but roughly like 7 months or so. And then I got a call last January from somebody who I worked with over in Texas. Hadn't heard from them in 2.5 or 3 years, and they told me, hey, this is the situation, here's the company, and recruited me over here. And so ever since I've been with New SunPower.
Cool. Nice. Interesting. Okay, so I want to ask, you're the first salesperson I've had on the show, and I'm
Hey,
fascinated with sales. And if you're down to give me your sales pitch, what you sell, and as if I were a customer, any objections that I might have or something like that. Are you game?
I'm game. So act as if I'm knocking on your door then, huh?
Yeah. However you want to do the pitch. I just want to see how you approach it. Regular customer, what you're selling, your product, and then maybe some like typical objections that you might overcome and kind of like how you pivot into like maybe a sale.
Okay, I got you. So, just one thing that I do want to throw your way. Technically speaking, I only set up the appointment for somebody else to come in to actually finalize out the sale of the product. But at the same time, with door to door in general, it's really a matter of you're selling yourself rather than the product that you're actually selling. Because like people buy from people that they like, people buy from people that they trust, and that's the biggest thing that you have to break through initially is getting somebody to see eye to eye with you and then actually being willing to hear you out. But just gonna act like a knock on your door. Knock, knock, knock.
Hello. Hi. How's it going?
Hey, not too bad. How about yourself, sir?
Doing good, doing good.
Good to hear. My name is Richard. I'm with the Utility Solar Program. They just dispatched me out to your area to let you guys know if you ever decide to look at solar for your property here, you don't need to purchase it or lease it any longer, like in regards to a product. This past year, California actually turned it into a utility service that's being provided to people instead. But I was actually going to ask you, sir, was there anything in particular that just kind of deterred you from going solar here so far along?
No, I didn't even know that was an option. But yeah, so how would this benefit me?
Well, ultimately, sir, as I'm sure you already know, whenever you buy your power right now, the only option that we get in this area is Edison, and they charge like 40 to 60 cents a kilowatt, depending on the time of the year, the time of the use, so on and so forth. But if your house was actually able to support going solar, you would get set up with all of the equipment, including a battery backup, so that you don't have any blackouts here at the home. But more importantly, you would get to start buying your power for between 20 to 25 cents a kilowatt. And there's no like loan against your credit, there's no lien against the property like the old lease agreements that they used to do. I mean, you don't even invest into the equipment or the installation itself. You just get to buy the same power that you already need for the house, but at a lot better cost. But does that make sense so far along?
Yeah, so you're saying that I'll save money by switching over. So realistically, is this gonna set me back anything at all, or what's the catch?
So the catch is, unfortunately, not every home actually qualifies for the program. I mean, there's some situations where, the house isn't able to support going solar, the roof needs too much work, or, I mean, heck, if you're not even using enough power for it to make sense, they won't even qualify your home for it. But essentially, it's not going to set you back anything if the house were to be selected. You just get set up with all of the equipment as new utility equipment for the home, and you just get to buy your power at a better cost. And part of the reason they're doing this is just because whenever we get our power from Edison right now, they just get it from out of state and they ship it into California for us to use. But they kind of charge us heavily for that service. It's called delivery charges. So, for example, and just to clarify, I normally have an example bill that I show people. But for example, this bill is a $250 bill. And down here at the delivery charges, of course, they do their tiered system, but you can see, 61, 78, so on and so forth. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now, even though I look at the thing all day, every day. But point is, it's $150 in delivery fees on a $250 bill. It's like 60% of your cost just to get the power to the house instead of for the power itself. Instead of you having to pay all those fees though for out of state power, if the house is able to produce it here locally instead, you get set up with everything to do so and you just get to avoid those fees.
Hmm. Well, that sounds good. So there's no catch, there's nothing out of my pocket, and it will save me money. Sounds like a no-brainer. So
Look,
what's
sir,
the next steps?
yeah, I
Yeah,
was about to say, trust me, I know solar is never a doorstep decision, and quite frankly, it's something that you gotta look into before you would even consider it. But the whole reason they have me out here today is just because we have a program advisor out here for a few days. They just draft up what's called a savings report for you to show you where you're at currently with Edison versus what the program would look like and what the new utility rate would be for the home. And then past that, you take all the time in the world to do your own research, maybe talk to some of the neighbors that already have solar, see what their experience has been. And if it's something that ever makes sense for you to do, you would just call back whenever you're ready for the help on it. But that being said, would you say you're easier to catch in like the morning time, or are you more of an evening person yourself?
let's say evening.
Okay, gotcha. Let me just double check what we have available real quick. And then I would go through a progression in terms of like actually booking the appointment, but it's almost always whenever I transition for the set, I always go with an option close, like, oh, morning or evening, or oh, are you guys more, you know, during the day? Do you work late? Something like that. Like, I try to get some sort of an option going just because I find it's a lot easier for people to choose between A and B rather than open-ended
Right.
questions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so my questions for you are one, what are the biggest objections that you usually get? And then two, let's say you do set an appointment, what happens to them at that point? So they talk with someone else and then they kind of walk them through, I don't know, options or the process of signing up, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I'll tackle the objections second. First and foremost, the idea of setting up the appointment. It's a setup so that somebody else can come to the house, build a design, show them exactly what the details of it would be. Essentially, there's a couple of different installation companies that can be chosen, so it's good to give people an overview as to what their options are. But the whole idea behind it is on a business aspect of it, people typically don't trust the guy who's coming to their door as much as they trust somebody else who's edified as a professional. And so there's people out there who self-gen, like they'll knock the door, they'll close their own deal. But at the same time, it's a lot more of a hassle for them because you're kind of like climbing a hill at that point. Like you're facing an uphill battle just because they don't initially trust you at their door. By setting up for somebody else to come through, you essentially are able to build up their character, their professionalism, their ability to give you the information. And then at that point, they're a little bit more lenient and open to hearing about it. But yeah, they just put together all of the info, they run it through with them. And for example, the individuals that I work with, they do what's called like a two-touch close. So instead of just like showing up the first appointment with everything ready and okay, like, you know, get you solar panels on the roof right away, they get there, they spend 15, 20 minutes with them, learn a little bit more about their situation, their needs, so on and so forth, and then they'll go for a second visit in order to actually run through the information, show them the design, and then proceed from there. And some people are interested in doing it immediately. Some people want to put it on the back burner a little while. It's really just a matter of person by person. Everybody's circumstance is different on
Okay.
it. Mhm.
So, so does that mean most people, it, the objection is like, I have to think about it sort of thing?
Yeah, so the objections that I face on the door is a lot different than what the actual individual faces inside of the home. For me,
Uh,
for example, the primary objection that you're going to get 9 times out of 10 is just, I'm not interested. Because
okay.
people have been knocking for solar forever here in California. It's been
Oh,
something that's been around for a very long time. And so people have these preconceived notions, and essentially the biggest hurdle that you're dealing with is you're trying to break their pre-programming on it in order to get them a little bit more open to the idea of it. Because everybody has this understanding of solar as either A, I gotta buy it, and they see it as super expensive, the numbers didn't make sense in the past, they
uh-huh.
have other projects going on. They just dropped 40K on their new kitchen design. They don't want to make that investment. And then other people are under the assumption of, okay, it's going to be a lease agreement. There's going to be a lien on the home as collateral. If I ever sell my house, I have to do all sorts of extra paperwork, hop through hoops, or I have to pay off the system at the time of the sale, and I'm going to lose tens of thousands of dollars on the sale of my house because that's essentially how solar was in the past, is either a purchase or a leasing option. But now with the new setup, people are able to get all of the equipment. They don't make the investment into it. It's not against their credit. It's not against the house as collateral. And they just get to purchase the power for a cheaper rate. And most of the time, people are open to the idea of that if you can get past the initial, I'm not interested in solar. That's the biggest
Oh, I
part.
see.
Yeah. And then obviously there's other objections, like some people just don't like the look of it on the roof. Aesthetics is a big thing whenever it comes to a house, and some people are just not a fan of
Interesting.
the design of it. Some people don't want anybody stepping on their roof. They don't want holes in their roof, which, I mean, if we're being honest about it, roofs are designed with holes in them. Shingle roof, for example, has hundreds of holes in it, but everybody has their own reasoning behind it. I mean, shoot, there's even some people out there who are like, no, I'm worried about the EMF that comes off of it. Like, the electromagnetic frequencies are gonna mess with me. I mean, everybody's got their own logic behind it, but typically you run into a lot of the same objections, which is just, I'm not interested in solar because of their pre-designed notion on it. I don't like the look of it on my roof, or I don't want anything on my roof. Those are probably the top
Interesting. So it almost feels like overcoming the problem of, well, it's like early adopter of like a new technology, even though it's not technically new, if I'm
3.
not mistaken, but it's more of like you're saying these preconceived notions of how it was in the past, and now it's like that stigma or whatever that they're stuck to, and so now it seems like, oh no, that's all weird stuff. That's not normal, so therefore ABC excuse, right?
Yeah. it's just like anything in life. A lot of the time people they formulate their opinion on it and then they just kind of die on that hill. They don't want to change their mind on it.
Yeah.
And so that's essentially what the whole purpose behind the door knock is just trying to convey the information in a way that they're willing to hear it out and understand, rather than just trying to head on tell them like, hey, it's solar, like let's set you up, because they're gonna shut it down 99 out of 100 times. But if it's displayed in a way where it's like, okay, this is different, this is something that might be worth looking into, then you get far along into the conversation and then you go for the set point.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's fascinating. And I want to move on now to the next topic if you're
Mhm.
cool with that. But I
Yeah,
think if we ever
absolutely.
do a part two, I would love to do a deep dive on sales and just kind of go back and forth and pick your brain on your experience as a salesperson. I've read so many sales books and it's always so fascinating to me, the psychology of influence and behavior change and things like that. So yeah, maybe for a part two.
Okay.
Cool. So let's pivot to topic number two. So mindset, hard, 75 hard, and personal development.
hmm
So you mentioned that you do 75 hard. Could you give an overview for what that is for the audience and then, what your journey has been like?
Yeah, most definitely. So it's essentially the equivalent of a personal discipline challenge. You need to do a set number of things. For example, you need to drink a gallon of water every day, do one 45-minute outdoor workout, one 45-minute indoor workout. You have to read 10 pages of a personal development book. You have to take a progress photo every single day in order to see how you're coming along. And you need to follow a diet. And on top of that, if you want to, you can add extra stipulations. So, for example, and it pains me to admit this, but I failed on Saturday. I found out on Sunday morning, and
Oh
it's
no.
because, yes, I made it to day 61 before I failed. Like, I failed on day
Oh
62.
my God.
And
Wow.
yes, it's painful. And the realization was it's because on Saturdays I go out early for work because people are up early on Saturdays. They're outside in their garage, so on and so forth. I always do my reading first thing in the morning before I get moving. I do my reading probably 30 minutes into being awake, but on Saturday I skipped doing it so that I could get out a little bit earlier because I was dropping some people off in their turf. And the whole rest of the day, I was doing various things. I got home probably 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I went down to the gym. I cooked myself food. And then I went to bed because I was under the impression that I had done everything else. Like I had everything done
Mm.
and I convinced myself that I did my reading. First thing whenever I woke up on Sunday morning, I was like, "Oh my God, I can't remember actually reading on Saturday." And so I
Oh my God.
failed by accident. Yeah. So today marked day 3 of the reset, and I added a new stipulation. I now have to read the Bible 15 minutes a day as one of my extra stipulations for 75 hard. And I did that just because I feel like there's been various times over the last several months that I've told myself, I want to read the Bible more. I want to get more ingrained in the Word. I want to take this time and do it. And I've never really made enough time for it. And so I realized the setback that I had in terms of failing, although it hurt, I could instead use that as a catalyst to do something else that I've wanted to get into. And so now every day I have to read the Bible for at least 15 minutes as one of my extra stipulations.
Okay. Interesting. Dang, man, getting that close. But
I
I
was,
guess I
I
guess
was,
it's if it's like a mental toughness thing. Yeah,
yeah,
I imagine it's like, all right, well, I guess you got to do more workouts then, like
yeah,
meaning the program, right?
yeah, exactly. And
Um,
it's one of those
so
things
I'm
where I already wanted to do it all throughout this year because I feel like I've seen a lot of results. It's felt great changing my discipline towards myself and becoming a better version of me along the way. And so I wanted to do this throughout the year and just every 75 days reset. I just hit the reset a little bit early.
Right. You're like, well, I'm resetting anyways, but I guess I did a little early.
Yep.
Interesting, interesting. So anything specific, I'm curious as an outsider who's never done this before, and you mentioned you feel different. Is there anything specific on how it's changed you as you're going through this?
Well, there's a few different formats that's changed me. Physically is one, just because obviously you're in the gym every single day, you're doing something physical outside as well, which I will say, I count my door knocking as my outdoor activity most days. There's some days where I get a little bit of extra time available and I'm able to, play some basketball, swim, something like that, so that I do another outdoor workout. And then the days that I don't door knock, which is only on Sunday, I always find something to do outdoor. Heck, even pickleball sometimes is the outdoor activity for it. But I've seen a lot of changes in terms of my physical prowess. I've gotten in better shape over the course of this. But on top of that, I'd say the largest change would be mentally, because it really is, it's a task to be able to hold yourself to a regimented game plan for every single day, because it's very easy to slack off, even if you want to be on top of everything and you want to do your best every single day, try to get 1% better, whatever platitude you want to use. It's very easy for you to give yourself a little bit of grace, and then that little bit of grace turns into, oh hey, I slacked off, and I read a quote last year that's really stuck with me, and at this point, it's something that I embody, especially for 75 hard, but in life in general, which is, it's easier to stick to your principles 100% of the time than 98% of the time. And the reasoning behind that is because if you knock yourself off from it a little bit, it's easy to create a slide, and it's difficult to recover from that until you get a little bit further away from what you're wanting to do than what you realize.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. I think doing something 98, 99% is actually harder than just doing it all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, like you said, like building that habit. So I like that. On the topic of mindset, what do you think is something important about mindset that you feel like people need to hear or hear more of? Something that you've learned in your life that's maybe reshaped you.
Yeah, so I would say the most important thing is your self-talk. And full transparency, I still go through periods of time where I struggle a little bit with my mindset, because ultimately I've come to realize I sometimes place a little bit too much personal value on how I perform in my career versus who I am as an individual. And what I would say is the biggest game changer for me is whenever I started working better on my self-talk, what I tell myself, what I say internally throughout the course of my day, it really changed me in drastic ways. And part of what helped me get to that point was I had a couple of coworkers whenever I first started at this job last year in January. Tiny bit of a preface: whenever I first came down here, I had just gotten out of a 5-year relationship. It ended in the most disastrous ways imaginable. And I basically was a shell of who I am as a person. And whenever I first came down here, I was, not intentionally, but ultimately, I was negative in terms of how I saw myself, how I would talk about different things. It was always a I hope, not an I will, or maybe I can instead of I'm going to. And I had a couple of coworkers who, whenever I spent more time with them, we would ride out to turf together and everything. They were helping me kind of reprogram that to an extent, telling me like, "Come on, Rich, like you gotta assume it's already happened. You gotta look on it from a bright side." And that essentially changed my entire trajectory. And on top of that, I read a book which I recommend to everybody. I had somebody, a coworker, give it to me. It's called As a Man Thinketh. But essentially, the whole idea behind it is you become your thoughts. And whatever you're thinking, whatever you're pouring into yourself is going to be what you ultimately become. And so if you pour a lot of negative stuff into yourself, or if you speak a lot of negativity in the world, words have power, and everything negative that you say or do is just going to stack up and turn you into a negative person. But on the flip side of things, everything positive that you say, everything positive that you think helps create you into a positive person. And realistically, I mean, if we get the choice to decide who we are and how we want to be, why wouldn't you pick being a positive person? Why wouldn't you want to look on the bright side of things, you know?
Right, yeah, exactly. I like that a lot. I don't know if I've read that book, but it's definitely come across on a lot of lists for to read, so I'll definitely add that. All right, I want to be respectful of time because I know we started with technical difficulties, but I think we can always save the rest for part two, but I would like to go to rapid fire if you're cool with that. Cool, awesome. All right, first rapid fire question. Name of the game. You don't have to answer quickly, but the questions are rapid fire, so we can jump around and whatnot. So just feel free to take your time. But first one, billboard question. If you could put up a sign for millions of people to see, non-commercial and metaphorical, what would it say?
It's a tough one. You know what? I read a quote recently that I think I would love to see on a billboard, which is, let the light that shines from you be brighter than the light that shines upon you.
I like that. Next one, self-inflicted wound. Do you have a story about something that's gone wrong in your life and you can't blame anyone else because you did it to yourself?
To be honest, I've suffered a number of wounds over the course of my life. I would say, you know what? Yes, I would say self-inflicted wound, even though it ultimately was a wound that somebody else inflicted on me. My decision to essentially put my hand back on the stove after I knew that it burnt me the first time was where I self-inflicted, which is the relationship that I mentioned that was 5 years, ended disastrously. There was a small hiccup after the fourth year, and we ended up working it out, but I should have taken it as my sign to walk away. I put my hand on the stove. I learned that the stove was hot, and I put it back on there right down the road. So,
Cool. I feel like I have a very similar story. We can probably connect on that offline. Um, if you could give your younger self advice, what would it be?
no matter what, don't give up. And on top of that, even if things aren't going the way that you intended them to or that you pre-designed, it's already written and there's a guideline that you're following, whether you can see it or not.
I like it. Okay, next one. How do you define success?
So that's a tough one for me, just because I'd say that there's two parts of me that fight in terms of how to define success. And it would be the career driven side of me defines success as doing stellar in my job, crushing it, setting up a ton of appointments, creating a ton of sales, so on and so forth. There's a heavy part of me that looks at that as success. But over the course of the last year, and honestly over the course of my life in general, but especially over the course of the last year, I've come to realize that, in my opinion, the other part of me, success is being able to help put other people in a better position and make a difference on a day-to-day basis. And it doesn't have to be large. And I feel like a lot of people get caught up on that. They only feel successful, me included. I'm guilty as charged, okay? But they only feel successful if they're making a large impact, especially within the career. But I feel like in our daily lives, what makes us successful is being able to uplift other people, put other people in a better position of some sort, not necessarily like financially saving them or anything like that, but just, I mean, shoot, I've bought people coffee and it ends up changing the entire trajectory of their day. I've had random conversations with people that it really didn't do a lot for me necessarily at the time, but you can see that it helped them in some sort of a fashion. And I feel like that's really where success should be placed, is your ability to positively impact other people's lives.
Next question. What is something you've been pondering recently or something you think about often deeply?
That's an interesting one because I have a lot of different things that I think about, and it could be career, it could be personal, but I think ultimately the thing that I've been pondering a lot recently is just what my overall purpose is. And it's ironic because Pastor Scott, shout out Pastor Scott, Anaheim Saddleback, he set me up with this book, A Purpose Driven Life. And essentially, I'm working my way through that. I'm on day 4 of it, but I'm hoping that that's going to clarify a little bit of the pondering lately. But what I've been thinking about a lot lately is just what my overall purpose is and what I should be doing to be able to give back to those around me versus what I get caught up in my day to day, which is focusing on my career, trying to be successful in terms of setting up appointments, this and that. But it's really just been eating away at me a little bit, and both a positive and a negative aspect in terms of what my bigger purpose is for life and for those around
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I highly recommend that book as well. I think it's a good reminder for me to reread it. And I think most if not all of us, I feel like come across that same issue. So thanks for
me.
sharing. Second to last one. What is one of the best or most worthwhile investments you've made in either time, money, energy, or etc.?
I would say that the most worthwhile investment that I've made is investing more time into developing myself. Personal development is probably the most crucial thing, just because a year ago, I was barely starting my personal development journey. Now, mind you, I told you I've done door to door for several years. I've been interested in sales for a long time. I never really did anything past the surface layer. I never really took the time to intentionally pour into myself to better myself. And over the last year, since I've actually started that journey, I've started reading more personal development books. I've started taking more time to take care of myself physically, mentally, spiritually. I started cooking myself better meals. I started working out more frequently. All of that, in my opinion, is under the category of personal development. And that's the best investment I've ever made in myself, just because at the end of the day, nobody is going to take care of you better than you can take care of yourself. And it's very easy for us to just become complacent in our day-to-day lives and tell ourselves like, oh, I'll hit the gym tomorrow, and then tomorrow becomes next week, and then next week becomes next month. And then out of nowhere, we realize, oh shoot, it's been forever since I've gone. Oh, I'm gonna start taking better care of my health. Like I'm gonna start eating healthier in a couple of days, or I'll start that next week. And then they just never get around to it. And quite frankly, since I've started reading more frequently, eating a healthier diet, being in the gym, I'm just naturally happier. Even at my lowest point, I would say I'm still mentally more positive than most everyday people. And it's because I actually take care of myself, and that's helped me get to a point where I love myself, and that's the best investment I've ever made. Because I mean, shoot, why wouldn't you invest into yourself, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I'm happy for you, man. And I think it really shows. I think my first impression of you was that person that's like, wow, this guy, like he has this light coming out of him that's very positive, and you can tell when you meet people like that on in a deeper level, you can tell they worked on themselves. So I feel like it really shows. So thanks for sharing that. Last question. Any favorite books, movies, articles, videos, or media that you recommend or share the most? I know we've already talked about As a Man Thinketh, Purpose Driven Life. Anything else that you recommend?
You know, honestly, it's kind of one out of left field because I had gotten it just at a yard sale. but it was a very basic breakdown to stuff that we may or may not already realize, but it really helped me give a little bit more consideration to myself. It's called Brain Rules by John Medina, Medina. But essentially, it just goes through chapter by chapter is like a different rule in terms of like how your brain works, what different stuff is associated with it. And it's just a very, I don't want to say basic and have it come off as almost disrespectful to it because I really enjoyed reading it, but it's like a very downplayed way of running through stuff that is worthwhile understanding about how your brain works, how we operate as people. And it really gave me a little bit of perspective in terms of showing myself grace for certain things that I may not have realized were a wiring situation instead of just, you know, thoughts or whatever. But yeah, I really enjoyed that book. Brain Rules.
Cool,
Yes.
thank you. I'll note that one down, put it in the show notes. All right, so that is the end of the questions that I have on my end. So we'll go into ending questions. So gratitude, we always end with gratitude. Shout out to my mom. So Richard, what are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for the life that I live. I'm grateful for the job that I have. I'm grateful for the fact that I live in California because at one point it was a state that I had convinced myself I would never come and visit. And now I get to wake up here every day and I love it. But I'm grateful for the fact that whenever I had my lowest periods of time, prayers were answered for me in ways that I never even imagined possible.
Second to last question, any final ask from the audience or any final takeaways you'd like them to have from this conversation?
Yes, if somebody knocks on your door, hear them out for a second. Just because it's very easy for people to get the impression that, oh my God, somebody's coming out to sell me something. Not everybody who knocks on your door is trying to make money off of you. Not everybody who just comes into your life abruptly is trying to get something out of you. You would be surprised if you just gave people a little bit more consideration, the fact that a lot of people can deliver more value to you than what you would ever imagine.
Mm. Okay, last question. Richard, where can people find you if they want to see what you're up to or connect? Where would you direct them?
Definitely to my Instagram. So that's the main form of social media that I use at this point. Every single day, I'm posting a lot on my Instagram story. It's typically a range of motivational stuff. And then on top of that, I always post some videos on the doors whenever I get out there, and I do my daily wrap up at the end of the day. But Instagram, follow me, and hopefully I can uplift you into a better life.
Awesome, sweet. We love it. Yeah, and then of course I'll link Rich's profile in the show description, so check that out. We've made it to the end. Congrats. Thank you for sticking through it. Before I stop the recording, I'll do my final sign off. So thank you, Richard, for being here. I appreciate it. And then to the audience, thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, 5 stars wherever you're listening to this, whatever platform, the usual. Leave Richard love in the comments below wherever you're seeing this. He'll see it. Reminder to always be kind to other people, especially yourself. And remember that you can always learn something from someone if you take the time to listen. So thank you guys for being here.